Finding Joy in the Holy Land, Israel, Part 1. We arrived at last in Israel and were on our way to a hotel in Tiberias in Galilee for the night. As we took the short scenic drive, there were two surprises. The first was the beauty of the Sea of Galilee, and the second, the information that it was not a sea but a lake. This body of water, we were told, is multi-purpose, used for recreation such as swimming and boating, as food supply from its fish, as well as for provision of about 40% of drinking water. Our guide was born and grew up in Jerusalem, had also lived in New York, and returned to Israel after converting from Judaism to Christianity. Consequently, he had a lot of relevant experiences, as well as different perspectives and interpretations of what we would see and hear. There were stories which he shared not only from documented history, but also from traditions. Perhaps the underlying message that I got from our guide was that Jesus lived a simple and ordinary life, fitting in with persons and practices in his community. He was like one of the guys, no fancy clothes. He had a popular name, Yeshua, the son of Mary and Joseph. People had to point him out. He grew up in Nazareth and knew Capernaum well. The Sea of Galilee was his backyard, and he stopped in Galilee whenever he went up to Jerusalem. At the same time, Joshua was exceptional in his consistent teachings, actions, and advocacy for social change on behalf of the disadvantaged, and more so in the last 3 years of his life. Joshua spoke with authority, and he was feared because of his miraculous and healing powers. Another general consideration advanced was that it was through oral tradition that many holy sites became known. Also, it was a norm for churches to be built on or near these sites. Additionally, natural disasters such as earthquakes or volcanoes, as well as wars, destroyed many of these ancient structures, which over time were abandoned, covered with rubble, and buried. Especially since the 19th century, there has been increased excavation and building activity on these sites. Many of them have been excavated, interesting structures found, and either built over or restored. We traveled north of the Sea of Galilee to the Mount of Beatitudes, or the Mount of Joy, overlooking the plain of Gennesaret. It was here that Jesus gave the Beatitudes, his Sermon on the Mount, which was directed at his disciples. Jesus spoke of another world based on different values and was pronouncing joy on those who understood. On this mountain is a beautiful octagonal Catholic church built in the 1930s by an Italian architect and run by Franciscan monks. At various locations in the beautiful garden, there are plaques with citations of each beatitude. Parts of the garden had been charred by a recent fire. Capernaum is located on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee and was the center of Jesus' ministry. Our guide pointed out that in those days Galileans were frowned on because they were less educated, had a heavy accent, and were not allowed to read from the Torah in the synagogue. Also, many Jews left Jerusalem and settled in Galilee to escape from the disputes, dissent, and the politics there. This site was purchased by Italians, and in 1886, excavations revealed ruins and artifacts. Ruins of an ancient synagogue with dark volcanic stones, probably built in the 1st century AD, have been unearthed. It appears that a synagogue made of white stones had been built on top of this older one during the 5th century. It is in the first synagogue that on Sabbath Jesus would have read and taught men and women in separate sections. He probably wore a prayer shawl while he did that. Like others, he probably immersed his naked body in water and the bath attached for purification prior to his reading and teaching. Not far away was the excavated ruins of the house of Peter. Archaeological evidence shows that the original structure was a small, square, dark house, unplastered and with no windows, but probably with a hole at the top for venting the fumes from olive oil lamps. When Jesus encountered the young fisherman Peter and invited him to follow him, Peter might have offered his house for Jesus to sleep while in Capernaum. Since then, Peter's house would have been expanded and renovated for worship after Jesus' death, to include a few small rooms clustered around 2 open courtyards. This structure was replaced in the 5th century by an octagonal martyrium church. The structure would have been damaged in the 7th century by earthquake and the Muslim conquest. A modern memorial church has been built over the old structure. In the early 90s, a 1st century wooden boat was found in the Sea of Galilee. A marine archaeology team carefully dug it out, filled it with polyurethane, sailed it, and lifted it to land with a crane. This bears resemblance to the boat which Peter and his friends would have used for fishing. This trip included, for us, a cruise in a modern boat on the Sea of Galilee. At one point, the River of Jordan divides Israel from Jordan. Evidence was presented to show that the baptismal site of Jesus is on the Jordanian side. Nonetheless, scores of persons were baptized by immersion on the Israel side of the river, solemnly following the example of Jesus Christ. The village of Magdala is the birthplace of Jesus' beloved, albeit ill-reputed disciple Mary Magdalene, who anointed his feet while he was alive and probably found his empty tomb. The village is located on the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee. Excavations found ruins of ritual baths, very rare artifacts, as well as ornate mosaics and frescoes, signaling the existence of an earlier synagogue, thought to be on that site between 50 BC and AD 67. In 2014, the Roman Catholic Legion of Christ built a new church to honor the women of the Bible. It contains impressive mosaics and paintings, and the altar is shaped like a 1st century boat. St. John's Gospel locates Cana, the place of Jesus' first miracle in Galilee. To date, 5 different places have been proffered as the exact location. The Franciscan Wedding Church in Cana was built in 1881 on the site of a 4th or 5th century synagogue. We visited the Church of Jesus Christ, which is located in an area surrounded by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The church has a large and active youth group, giving promise for the future. Several visiting couples renewed their vows in that church. Nazareth Valley is a living history village depicting the life and culture of Nazareth during the period when Jesus lived there. There were olive trees and an authentic ancient olive press with baskets, beam, and millstone, operable by a donkey. Also displayed was an authentic wine press where people would take off their sandals and squeeze the grapes with their moving feet, taking home the extracted juice to ferment for 40 days. There was also a genuine ancient water channel used to collect every drop of water during the rainy season in the winter. A tomb with a huge rock at the entrance provided the backdrop for the story of Jewish burials. It was explained that within 24 hours of death, the body is washed, anointed with spice and oils, wrapped in linen, and laid in the cave for 1 year. After a year, the bones are collected and placed in an ossuary, a stone box, the length of the longest bone. Space is therefore made to accommodate the burial of the next person that dies. The tools of Jesus' time were also on display: plane, chisel, adze, and saw. Lying near to another workspace where a lady was quietly gathering cotton, spinning yarn, weaving fabric, and making garments. The journey so far seemed like reliving history, with Jesus being the central character. Whether he was bonding with his first disciples, visiting Peter at home, teaching the curious in the nearby synagogue, traveling across to the River Jordan, or conversing with Mary at Magdala. It was easy to picture and savor the harmony derived from living close to nature among the animals, collecting and conserving scarce water, growing and reaping grapes and olives, making oil and wine to enrich the lives of members of the community. They were also reminders of human conflict, which caused persons to leave Jerusalem and resulted in the exclusion of Galileans from reading in the temple and the prevention of the disabled from worshipping in the synagogue. Yet, remembering the Mount of Joy and the Beatitudes, there was a strong feeling of hope that the change which Yeshua advocated would cause peace to prevail over conflict and love to conquer hate.